Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. I wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. For those of you who are fans of classic series, yes, what you are looking at is was a model of the original 1978 Battlestar Galactica Cylon base star. Now, it's a nice little model kit, worth about $150. I paid $5 for it. I was at a place and the store owner was getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and I said, just what's the price of that? And he said, give me $5 and it's yours. And you know what? I'm a fan of the original series, so I said, sure. Here's $5. And now I have this lump of plastic that originally cost $120, $150, whatever it is. They keep going up in price for $5. This is an example of good consumerism. But ultimately, it's an example of a lot of lost money. Somebody originally spent money to buy the model kit, to buy the glue, spent the time putting it together, all that kind of thing. All for me to wind up for it for $5. Something went wrong along the way. There's a lot of missing value. There's a lot of missing value from the economy at the present time. There's a lot of venture capital companies out there. And basically, they kind of do what I did. Except instead of model kits, they buy companies. There's a few companies that come to mind. KB Toys, pretty successful if you're Generation X. You probably have been to one at some point or another. Toys R Us, which interestingly bought KB Toys while itself was owned by Binances Capital, which had previously sold KB Toys. And Binances Capital is just one of the financial groups that are predatory capitalists. There's just no defending them. So let's look at what Binances Capital does. Basically, they're a big pit of money. Remember the financial black holes I talked about? They're one of them. In the early 2000s, they bought out KB Toys. And they did this on what's called leverage, which means KB Toys had to sell their stock to Baines Financial. And in return, basically, Baines Financial said, yeah, we're going to give you the capital to keep going. A year later, Baines Capital said, all right, we own your company now, so we're going to take $100 million. We're going to give it to our investors, and we're going to give $34 million of it just to our CEOs and presidents and all the inner circle, the inner council, whatever you want to call them, the board of directors. That $34 million comes right off you and goes to them. And there's nothing you can do about it. Now, there's hundreds of these capital firms, investment brokers, people that supposedly come up with money so that you can continue doing your business. They might have money, but they're almost always scummy. And that $100 million stunt that I mentioned, that's probably the least horrible thing that they've done. There's this idea out there that you go on a place like Shark Tank, and I don't know if you've seen the show, it's worth watching an episode or two because even though it's really simplified and really glamorized, that is kind of how deals get done. You can have a fantastic product. Let's say you have a company that makes model kits and you have a good contract. I don't know, pick one of the modern science fiction shows. Let's just say Star Trek. You've got a contract with Paramount to sell whatever merchandise they have, or CBS, or whatever it is. Fine, fantastic, but you need money to start up your lines. So you go to one of these investors and they say, okay, here's the deal. Just like on Shark Tank, in return for 50% of your company, I'm going to invest X millions of dollars, and in return, either you can buy me out in 5 years or whatever terms they name. And usually you're pretty desperate to get your company going because you see the dollar signs in front of you. So you take on this investor, end quotes, and they come in. Now, they'll usually put themselves into a position where they have ownership or the opportunity to get ownership because they're looking to see if you know what you're doing. And if your company is making money, they have no problem buying it out from you. After all, there's a reason that the four people on Shark Tank are sitting there because they looked at everything when its prices were down and they made the right deals. I'm going to pick on Mark Cuban, not because of anything against him, but because he's an easy guy to get a hold of. Here's a man who's really mastered the art of the deal. And literally, the people they parade in front of him on Shark Tank are small potatoes. Kevin Leary, the rest of them, they have so much money at their disposal. This is how they spend. This is entertaining for them to go on Shark Tank and see the people grovel for a couple $100,000 or whatever it might be. And what they're looking for is your intellectual property. They're looking for your sweat equity. You've already put into the business all the idea of getting the contacts, the information, all that sort of thing. That's what they're looking to get a hold of. And they're on national TV. They're publicly putting it on display. There's a deal that I've been working on for a while. And I'm only telling you this now because I've finally given up on it because I'm no longer in a position to make the deal for various reasons. The space station that's going to be around the moon is being assembled in the next couple of years. And I happen to have all the inside information on where the arm is being built for it. It's actually not very far from me. And I know the shipper, I know a lot of the company people, and I was trying to work a deal. All I really wanted to do was to get the deal so that I could have the arm come in front, have me and my friends take a picture with it, and then send it on down to Florida where it's going to go for final assembly. And that was really all I wanted, that picture. I was willing to take a little bit of a financial risk just to move that one load. But that picture would be worth it in terms of sweat equity. But I'm no longer in a position that I have a flatbed at my ready disposal that I can send to Florida, so that's not going to happen. The way I was doing it, I was playing with house money. These millionaire, billionaire investors, they're playing with their own money, but it's well-protected money. There's a colloquial term, blank money. I'll leave you to fill in the blanks. But that's all they're doing. It's their pocket change that they're throwing at these people. And in return, they get to look at the insides of the organization. They get to change it to be the way that they want it. And they get all the secrets. They get all the technical data. They get everything so that if you go bankrupt, they buy it off you, launch it 2 years later, and it's now their product. In my case, having spent years negotiating contracts like this is just a fun little thing that sits around in my office. And at some point, I intend to get another model like it whenever something else drops out of the sky. I'm going to put it up, hang it from the ceiling, and maybe have it looks like they're confronting each other in battle. That's just my silly little plan. But in real life, I negotiate deals like that every day. And I know it's a good deal, and I know it's a bad deal. Silverlight ain't no fool. But that's really the question. Do you know your market? And most people don't know your market. In most industries, the market is pretty simple. Let's imagine this as a pie chart. So cut it down the middle, whatever it costs it to get it on your desk, double it and charge the consumer. So it costs you $100 to get it sitting on your desk, charge $200 to the consumer and ship it to them. Now, that's in a perfect world where everything's okay. Anything with property management involved, like retail or business and whatsoever, the pie becomes wedges, triangles, and each one is 33.3%. You've got your maintenance and costs. So whatever it costs you for the building, whatever it costs you for your product, whether that's food, toys, whatever the heck else it is, 33% cost in wages, maintenance, all that sort of thing, then 33% cost is your profit. And those are your two basic models. Logistics, like I work in, is way more complicated. Your costs are fixed. And right now we are edging out this little tiny bit, this little bit here, that we're trying to get going for our profit. This is getting smaller and smaller every year. Everybody's trying to squeeze everybody else out. They're saying right now that there's a shortage of truckers. There isn't. There's a hell of a lot of truckers out there. There's going to be a shortage of trucking firms. And the reason for that is trucks are not cheap. Trailers are not cheap. Reefer units are not cheap. And even when we were shut down for the pandemic, trucking companies were able to keep going because food still needed to move. Now, we were not going at 100%, but the difference is, instead of me paying $5 for this little model here, the person would have been wanting $200 to $300 for it. Instead of a throwaway, it became something of value because everything had value then. And everybody thought their individual stuff had great value. That's a sad story. It's hard to tell people your stuff doesn't have value. And unfortunately, in the logistics industry, there's always somebody who's desperate enough to do it, just to get their driver, their truck back so they can either give it to somebody else or send it on another load. And I've seen it. I've seen the world's worst abuses happen just over the idea of saving $1. I had one driver trapped out in Winnipeg because my former boss couldn't keep his mouth shut. My driver, nice fellow by the way, no problem with him, always a swell fella, and he was in Winnipeg, and there's not a hell of a lot of freight coming out of Winnipeg. And as always, when you're talking to a driver, do you want to go down to the States? Where do you want to go? And this driver told me specifically, I'll be honest with you, I can go to the States, but it's a lot of hassle. And I pay attention to my employees, and I said, tell me, why is it a hassle for you? And he said, well, if you want the truth, I was once accused of attempted murder. And even though the charges were dropped and there was no problem, every time I go through the border, they give me a hard time, which, yeah, that happens to a lot of drivers. You have one little thing on your record, and suddenly they make your life a living hell. I understood that, and I went to my boss, who was in the middle of negotiating something, and this is supposedly a man who has aspirations to be a vice president and stuff like that. And I quietly said to him, okay, our driver in Winnipeg, I remember his name, but I'm not saying anything, said to my boss, look, he can't go to the United States. Well, and I told him the story. There's this accusation it was dropped, but he has a problem with the border. Well, he's talking to one of the customers negotiating a deal. Now, if you've ever negotiated a deal, you want to present your company like it's the best thing ever. Again, look at Shark Tank. These people come across positive, happy, and everything. My boss was sitting there, and he was dealing with a major company that we did business with. And his exact words were, yeah, buddy, I got somebody in Winnipeg. Do you have any loads coming out of there? Nah, this guy can't go to the United States. Attempted murder, yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of people we hire here at blank. And I almost blew my top. I was still young in the logistics game back then, but I knew you don't say something like that to a customer ever. Again, back to Shark Tank. They don't sit around, well, under questioning they find that out, but it's not something you volunteer off the top of your head. Why are you here looking for money? We're attempted murderers, That's just not something that you do. And I've just seen so many blown opportunities in the years because of that. But the trucking industry is in for a major correction. The smaller companies are probably going to start getting swallowed up, and the bigger companies are going to be adding capacity. And just like the fast food industry, yeah, it's still possible to open your own little small mom and pop joint, but you still have to compete against the major fast food places. You have to know your market. I always like to point to Wendy's as a good business model because Wendy's started out with two things: potatoes and ground beef. And buns, of course. And they made the ground beef into either burgers or into chili. And then eventually they ate chili fries, and then they started getting into all sorts of the other things, but they kept their ground principles. And they built off of that. Everything else was an afterthought. Sure, for a long time, some people couldn't go to Wendy's because they were vegetarians, couldn't eat beef, whatever the case might be. No questions asked, but Wendy's made sure they stuck to the core business. Only once they were multinational and they had their hammer grip on everything, that's when they were able to say, okay, now we can add some chicken. Now we can add some salads and stuff like that. But for the longest time, Wendy's had a core business model that couldn't be argued with. Their supply chain was set up, their logistics were set up because in a matter of getting the beef from point A to point B, and once it got to their restaurants, they had a day to sell it as their little famous little square. Then after that, it got made into chili, and people buy it either way. In my opinion, that is a fantastic business model. Tim Hortons at one point had this brilliant business model. Coffee, tea, donuts, period. Now that they've been as successful as they are, they've branched out into other things. But we're going to see a contraction. And yeah, you're probably going to lose your favorite sandwich or your favorite whatever because everybody likes the little things. And unfortunately, when there's a problem in the economy, you have to focus on what brought you to the party. Me finding a $5 deal. Me working on that glamour project was for my own entertainment and nobody else's. I just wanted to have that picture. It's probably as close to space as I'll ever get. But that's what you have to remember. When you're negotiating, what is being asked of you and what are you offering? Because big companies like KB Toys, Toys R Us, and Sears had lots to offer and were all systematically ripped apart. Don't let it happen to you. If you go into business, I wish you nothing but the best in the world. But the same token, remember, those investment firms are out there and they are predators. They're looking for the little guys like you and I. And let's not give them a reason to laugh while they look in their wallet while you and I cry while we look in ours. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And we hope you have a fantastic day.